Okay, then.
All right.
Okay, so here we go.
Okay.
Three, two, one. Welcome or welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. Today, we have the honor and pleasure to be joined by Nicole Harris, someone to whom I honestly do not know a whole lot about, but I know that you're doing a lot of great stuff for blind people all over the world. You have quite the following. You're doing a lot of different projects. And overall, I have come to understand that you, excuse me, have had quite a life journey, so far. So we'll work through and talk about everything you want to talk about and everything you're doing and things like that. But why don't you first of all start out by answering my question that I always like to ask, and we'll just kind of walk through your life journey. So, who is Nicole Harris? I'll mute my
Nicole,
microphone for a while. For a while,
awesome.
dig right in. Go ahead.
Nicole Harris is a brass knuckle beauty, a strikingly beautiful, brilliant, and inspired soul. I'm also a beautiful accomplice, and that simply means that I help others understand how to support people on their terms. And I always use the term accomplice over ally because allyship tends to deal with power structures. When you're accomplice, if one person's getting in trouble, both of y'all are getting in trouble. So if I need support, I'm going to want an accomplice, somebody that's going to be there with me through the moments where I'm trying to navigate a world that is not necessarily set up for me. And I learned this because I've been an advocate for over 20 years, and then I've been advocating for myself for the past 12 years. And so from the time I was 12 years old, I was always advocating for other people, and I didn't know that I naturally built those skills. I naturally became a leader, and my name actually means leads people to victory. So it just kind of the stars aligned, and I started to live this life where, by all means necessary, I help people understand that number one, they're powerful, and then number two, you can be an assistance to someone else on their terms and not make them feel belittled or babied or any of the things like that.
Really, really good. All good. So, why don't you walk through a little bit more about, in my case, Nicole, I was born blind and I'm 33 years old. So I was born blind with glaucoma and a congenital heart defect. But why don't you walk through a little bit more about I think as I understand you were actually born sighted. You were not born into
Yes,
this beautiful blindness world, right? So
exactly.
why don't you kind of push rewind back up, put it in reverse for a bit and walk through, okay, how did you lose your vision? Walk through that whole experience. The reason I ask is
Yes.
it's deeply fascinating to me as someone who
Yes.
was born blind. um, I really intellectually and philosophically struggle to, um, I really struggle in a philosophical way to have, I guess, to understand what it must be like to become a blind person, only because I was never a sighted person. So, so
Yeah.
you see, that's a very specific thing. I would like to tell you that I have compassion for you as a blind person. And I will tell you that I have compassion for you as a person, but not because you're blind. In other words, don't call me sorry. Don't say sorry to me. I'm not sorry. There's no sorrow in blindness. So yes, why don't you walk through your journey both physically, emotionally, philosophically, spiritually, as far as you growing up, you were born sighted and then became blind. Walk through it.
Yes. So it of all things was on New Year's Eve when I discovered that something was really wrong with my eyes. And what ended up happening was I was given the wrong medicine. So I'm going to do my makeup as I love to do. And I was like, is it the lighting in here? I don't know why I can't do this pink cut crease, but something is wrong. So we were going to my sister's first party, New Year's Eve party at her house. And I go in the door and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong. There's something wrong with my eyes. She's like, okay, let's just get through the New Year's. So she did my makeup. And then immediately that Monday morning, I went to the doctors and I went to the emergency room and they gave me the same antibiotic that they'd given me previously. They're like, oh, we don't know. Just take the antibiotic for a little bit longer. Turns out I was allergic to that antibiotic and they gave me the wrong medicine. And I should have never had that medicine. And so what it did was it exasperated a condition that I had called pseudotumor cerebrae or intracranial hypertension. And what intracranial hypertension is it's when your brain, essentially your estrogen levels are really high and all that excess fluid, it's creating its own fluid. So that's going up your spinal cord. And then that's putting pressure on your optic nerves. So back when all of this happened about 12 years ago, they didn't have a lot on it. So it was about 10 to 15 days where they were like, don't go back to work. Stay at home, stop taking the medicine, do all the things. So I was a slew of appointments. And every time the ophthalmologist would look at my eyes and they'd be like, they'd run out the room. And I was like, if this happens one more time, now, mind you, I'm going blind, but I have nobody taking me to the doctors. Like, I'm literally catching a bus and doing everything by memory. Fortunately, my skills as an early childhood educator and taking thousands of children on field trips for like 15 years, I was very safety conscious. So I was listening and looking and all the things that would help me in mobility training, I was already doing. So finally, my ophthalmologist says, I need you to go to your neurologist. And I go to my neurologist and he's like, hmm, runs out the room. It's like, oh. And then he comes back like 15 minutes later. He's like, when they have a bed for you in the neurology unit, you need to go. So I just thought I was getting another spinal tap. I was used to spinal taps for them to check my levels, check my fluids, and all of that stuff. And they're like, you're going to get a lumbar drain. And so that procedure is where they're sticking a drain in your back to lower the levels of fluid in your cranial cavity safely. And thank goodness I walked on fire like 5 years prior because that was the most excruciating pain I ever experienced in my life. They gave me little to no lidocaine, and it was just, I had to stay completely still. And the best way to describe it was like electricity going through my arms and legs, and I could not move. Like, I could not move because they were in my back. And my sister, she had looked on her little S2 Galaxy phone at the time, and she was telling the neuro, she's like, I see people in the pictures, they're curved over. My sister's super flexible. Just drop down the table a little bit. And so finally, my sister just kind of got up and dropped down the table. And then they finally, after about 45 minutes, got the drain on my back. And then I had to sit there for 4 days. And so my sister was so great. She like bought me movies to watch. We laughed, we joked. She played meditations for me just to relax and things like that. And so after that experience, it was like, well, what's next? My career was gone in an instance. I was stuck at home and then I was going to doctor's appointments and it was like signing up for Social Security, getting my California state disability, all of these things I had to do on my own. My family wasn't set up to do this. I have a young son who's like 11 going on 12. Like, this is January of that year was a crazy month. And I was like, how am I going to do all of this stuff? And then I remember going to this hospital and I was like, you did this to me. You gave me no resources. And I'm like crying because I needed a paper sign for an appointment that I had. And I'm like, I have no money. Like, I don't know what to do. And so what ended up happening was she gave me two phone numbers, and that was for the Vista Center, which is located in Palo Alto, California, and the Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco, California. And I called both of them, and the Vista Center got back to me first. And so then that's when I got my intake. But my intake didn't start till like March or April of that year. So it had been about 3 months since everything happened. Hello, can you hear me? I'm sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. No problem. Okay.
Yeah,
So hold on. Don't let that stop you. Just relax.
no problem. Let me turn off voiceover for you real quick. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Hello?
Okay. Hello.
There
Are
you
you
go.
with us?
I'm with you. Sorry about that. It hit my power button and then it kicked me out again. I'm sorry about that.
Well, don't hit that. Well, don't
Yeah,
push that button then. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Let's not do.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Okay. Let's regain our let's get our
Gain our
wires.
momentum. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Tell me when you're ready.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. The problem that we're having now
Mhm.
is now this is not going to make any bit of difference when you hear the actual podcast. Um, okay. Okay. All right. Here's the thing.
Mhm.
Are you ready and are you going to stay with us? Because I don't know how the system's going to react. I paused the recording, so there's not going to be a pause in the
Uh-huh,
podcast.
got
It's
you.
not going to
Yeah.
be noticeable.
Yeah.
So are you ready to kind of pick up the conversation? Because I'm going to
Oh
open
yeah,
this
yeah,
submenu.
yeah. I
Okay.
remembered when yeah, because somebody called me and I have my phone on do not disturb. I was
Ah,
like,
it must be
what?
in your favorites. Okay, that's how they
Yeah,
push
yeah.
through.
So yeah,
All right.
so I was
Hopefully
like,
that won't.
what happened? Yeah.
Hopefully
So
that won't happen. All right.
I called everybody. I was like, do not call me during this time. And that was the one call that
Oof.
decided to get through. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. Okay, no
Yeah.
sweat. It happens. So here we go. I'm going to try to open this menu.
No
Uh,
problem.
Okay. So resume recording. Okay, this is pretty cool. The software has the pauser. All right then. So this should
Awesome.
work. Okay.
Awesome. Great.
So
Thank
just
you so much.
relax, pick up your sentence, and when I say three, two, one, take one
Gotcha.
breath, and then we're back in.
Okay.
Here we go. Three, two, one.
So I found myself with no resources, and then I had the ticket to resources, which was the Vista Center. And a slew of counselors came to my home and they helped fit my home with things like safety rails in my bathroom, fix the rails going down my stairs to make sure that I had a safe environment. And slowly I was beginning to learn blindness life skills. And it was very different because I could see somewhat, but everything was very blurry. So prior to this, I had 20/20 vision. I was a photographer. I did fashion talent showcases. I was an early childhood educator. So I was a Jill of all trades, to say the least. And it felt very much like everything was taken away from me because some of the simplest things I couldn't do. At the time, I had an S2 phone. It had all of my MP3s so I could like listen to music, but that was really it. If I needed a text message, it was text to speech. And this was around 2012 when this happened with technology. And I was just like, what do I do? And so they were like, well, do you want to go to school? Do you want to go back to work? And I was like, I've always wanted to go to school. And every time I did, I was a single mom. So every time I wanted to go to school and I'd go to the college, I'd sign up. They'd be like, well, you got to quit your job for CalWorks, which is a program that supports single mothers, would pay for it. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. I have to pay rent. I have to pay for my child. I can't just say, bye, responsibilities. And so this was like my golden ticket. And I'm a person that always wanted to learn, wanted to get my bachelor's degree, but I became a mom at 19. And so it was very challenging for me. So then immediately I was ushered into technology training. So I went to my community college. I said, I'm going to be coming here next year. I talked with the assistive technology teacher. She said, great. I am teaching a student with voiceover next year. She's like, I prefer that you get a Mac. I was like, cool, let's go. And I also was team Mac because I had previously bought a Toshiba and I was like, I need to take it to the store if I need to fix it or anything like that. So we had a great time learning all of these things. I received a Victor Reader. And then what ended up happening is about 6 months into this journey, all of a sudden I started going lights out. And so then I started doing mobility training lights out. And I was like, what is going on? And finally, of course, the doctors would go in the room and run out again. And then I was like, what is happening? And they're like, you have a cataract growing over the eye that you can see out of. And I was like, what do you mean? And prior to this, maybe 4 months after, I had a surgery, which was called an optic sheath fenestration in my left eye. And basically, that was so I wouldn't have to have a shunt for the pseudotumor. And they had studies that said that it would give me back my depth perception in my right eye, which was doing all the work. So I was like, okay, let's sign me up. Let's do it. And I really hope that the medical system gets better in America because I literally was there the morning of the surgery at 5 a.m. and they're like, you have a $2,500 copay. And I'm like, I have no money. I have $5 in the bank account. And my sister is like, give me the phone. And she's like, she's $5. And they're like, okay, we'll have her swipe her card for that $5. It was crazy. But I had that surgery. And then when I received the notice that I had a cataract, they're like, well, it's not going to make a difference. And I was like, well, it makes a difference to me because I can distinguish my money. I can do this. I can read signs, all of these things. They're like, well, it doesn't make a difference. And I was like, whatever. So in my mind, I was like, I'm going to get a cataract surgery. And so in tandem, I was doing mobility training. I did like at least 36 hours of one-on-one assistive technology training before I started college. And then I started with actually a full course load of 12 units, and I loved every moment of it. Now, it was kind of different navigating my campus because I could kind of see it before. So I had to find different landmarks and kind of do it all on my own. But my college was a really nice, welcoming community. And then fast forward to I get a call and they're like, we can do a surgery on your eye. And it was actually the last day that I had insurance with that hospital. And so when they took that cataract off, I was like, freedom, because it just felt like I wanted to claw my eye out sometimes because you have something growing over your eye and you feel like you've lost everything. Yet my I'm always kind of like a Pollyanna where I always look at the cup half full. What can I learn from this? And that's just something that I've learned from working with children for so long, for advocating for young children and things like that. I understand the power of words. And like I worked with my son on just saying, you know what, you learn differently. There's no, like, I don't believe in attaching stigma to things. And I'm like, we'll figure out the tools and the strategies for you to thrive. And so if I'm telling my child that, then I have to be strong enough to tell myself that. So then fast forward to I kind of started dealing with the blindness isolation because I would hear conversations around me, but I wouldn't be in the conversation. And I was hanging out upstairs and I heard a group of people just like making a ruckus in this room. And I was like, what is this place? And so I happened to be facilitating dialogues because I was a communications major and I got my certification. And I happened to be with the president of the Associated Students for Skyline College. He's like, "Oh, you're dope. You should join our council next year." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go. Let's do it." So the next thing I know, I was filling out paperwork to become a senator, and of course, I ran and I won. And then it was an instant kind of having a friend group, going to conferences, doing a lot of things, going on retreats, and I absolutely loved and thrived in college. And then that first semester when I was a senator, I decided that I wanted to go to a UC school. And so I was like, my counselor looked at me. She's like, Nicole, you're a senator. You're president of a couple clubs. Like, I was a social butterfly at this point. Everybody knew me. Everybody knew I'd be volunteering in the ways that I could. And literally, I was just like, okay, let's go. And she's like, if you want to go to UC Santa Cruz, you have to take 18 units basically until you leave. She's like, you can't do any more student government. I was like, yeah, whatever. And she didn't know that I wanted to be president. So then the next year, I was president of student body and I was doing 18 units plus I was doing I was the treasurer of the Black Caucus of California Community Colleges. And I was doing that and I helped coordinate their 14th conference. Like I was doing a lot of things and it was amazing and I loved it. And then I ended up securing the 2015 Pister Carl F. Pister Scholarship for UC Santa Cruz. So I got a full ride to UC Santa Cruz where I studied community studies with an emphasis on economic justice. And during that time, that's actually when I immersed myself in the blind community. That's when I went to be a intern for the Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco. And I really learned about the inner workings of the blind community, how there can be implicit bias with counselors and just people that you think should not have bias, that would have a lot of bias that would impact the kinds of services that individuals got and received. And I was like, okay. And so I had to write these massive papers. It ended up doing my capstone. And I talked about how basically bias can affect what kind of services that people of color receive. And I did a lot of surveying, a lot of interviewing, a lot of people getting anecdotal stories, a lot of data collection because it was an ethnographic research that we had to do. And just understanding that elements of nonprofits are kind of give you the ick, but they're do a lot of good. So you have to kind of see the good and the bad and things like that. And I actually won the CNFB scholarship, their highest scholarship that year as well, while I was an intern for that organization. And I got to see a different side of the NFB because my first interaction when I was interviewed for scholarships was horrible and gave me a very different idea of that, how the organization or the people in the organization, because sometimes it's not the organization, they have a great philosophy, but it can be the people that are representing that organization that can turn people away from using their services. And for a long time, that's how I was until I actually made like a lot of friends in the community. And they're like, we're not all like that. Some people are just really hard on other people. And I was like, you have to understand there is a difference if you have access to learning Braille, because I've had counselors tell people that go blind in their 30s, like, we're not paying the money for you to learn Braille. And I go, these are the stories coming from their mouth. So you can't make them feel bad for not knowing Braille when there is, ways that we can do it electronically. And I was watching the trajectory of technology just change over and over and over again. And I was like, it's getting better bit by bit because about 4 or 5 years ago was when I could start adding my own alt text to my pictures on Facebook. So I've seen the difference in technology and I've always just wanted to give an outpouring of information to people. I've always been the resource gatherer and the resource giver. And that just translated into all the work that I did. And so, of course, I did very well at UCSC, except for my first semester. I almost failed out because I didn't have the resources that I needed to support me in my blindness journey. And I made my school understand that. I leveraged the power of my scholarship and I said, these are the things that I need. I didn't get my computer from DOR until my second quarter. And I was doing my homework on an iPad and an iPhone 5. And I was calling my mom, I was like, hey, can you format this for me? Because I didn't have a reader. I didn't have somebody. So I made my school get it together, and they got it together before DOR could. Because number one, they knew that part of my scholarship was a plethora of resources that I didn't have access to. And I understood that my position as a person saying, hey, look, what about this for your visually impaired students made other people take note. And they changed a lot of things. Like I advocated for them to, I'm like, if we're students and there's student sanctioned events and you're driving us to and from our classes and to and from events, you should let us be able to go to events on weekends and Friday nights. That's how we can be integrated and feel like we're not just in our rooms doing that, because the social isolation played a lot into it. And when I was at UCSC, I worked in student retention, and then I went on to be the program coordinator for engaging education, where I was putting on the activities that we were having with a group of students. That it was a student-led nonprofit, and it really taught me a lot about organizing and being there for the people. And post grad, I graduated. In post grad, I worked. I volunteered at the Lighthouse for the Blind, so I was the Lighthouse Volunteer of the Year in 2019. I worked a lot with the youth, and I always say, keep your cane hand strong, or keep your cane hand strong and prosper. And it was because I saw a lot of youth not using their canes. Like if you're in the in between, you're like, I might use my cane. And I'm like, use your cane. It took one time me banging my knee on something to be like, you need to be using your cane. Although you can see better than you did before, use your cane, Nicole. And so then I got into the lull of the trying to find and seeking employment. And then I just realized how in ineffective DOR can be with certain things, because I had helped co-teach the employment immersion program at the Lighthouse. I did 3 rounds. I interviewed with all the Google recruiters, so I knew that I interviewed very well. And the problem is when you get to this disclosure piece and things like that, and just it just became really weird. So after hundreds of job interviews, getting to round 2, round 3, I'm like, okay, this system is not working and it's not good for my mental health. And I remember working with my new DOR counselor, and he just was a total tool. I was like, I'm not going to sit on the phone with somebody to do my resume for 2 hours when I'm paying to have my resume professionally done, because I understand that they're going through scanners. And this is why I'm getting the results your other clients aren't getting, because I'm doing something different. I'm not sitting on the phone learning about writing my resume, because I taught this for a whole 10 weeks while I was on field study. And so I was like, just going back and forth with them. And finally I was like, you know what? I can't have you tell me one more time that I should be filling hand sanitizer bottles during the pandemic. I was like, obviously, you haven't read my case. Obviously, you haven't seen that I have 5 college degrees and I received those 5 degrees in 5 years. I have a commendation from a US senator. I have organized and did a multitude of things. Filling hand sanitizer bottles is not for me, especially when it's a 2 hour commute to and from that place of employment. That is not for me. That is for somebody else that wants to do that job. And so it's just a push and pull back and forth. And I was just like, I've kind of had it. And so I haven't really worked with DOR. When I did talk to them like recently about going to grad school, they were kind of like, well, you have to do it this way and you have to do it that way. And I was like, the person that was my counselor was being very rude, disrespectful, and condescending. And how did you guys remedy that situation? You didn't. So you're penalizing me and not assisting me with my job growth when I actually know. And it's funny because sometimes when there's blind people with like PhDs, they talk down to you. And I was like, they were like, how did you get 600 participants? And I was like, because I run multiple Facebook pages, I'm in multiple groups, I talk to multiple people, I go to multiple conferences, and I'm not combative, and I don't use my education as a tool of saying I'm better than you. And that for me, a lot of times I've experienced that in the blind community, and I never want to be that way. I try to call in versus call out. And so fast forward to the pandemic happening and me discovering TikTok and then me teaching blind people how to market and things like that. Then I pushed away from that because, the numbers weren't numbering. And then fast forward to like a year or two later, I found out that I had ADHD. And I was like, oh, this is why sometimes I feel so sad when things aren't going my way when it comes to rejection sensitive dysphoria. And then earlier this year, I just made the decision. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to teach blind people how to do this because my thing is, I don't want you to feel isolated. And if social media is a way for you not to feel isolated, I'm going to teach you how to work it. And I'm going to figure it out from the lights out perspective because I know that I can see a lot. I have a lot more vision than some people. And I can give you little tips that will help you. Like one of the ones that I recently was working on was developing hooks with people because hello, I'm blind is not a hook. That's a statement about you. And you're not calling in the audience. And a lot of times what happens is we parrot or mirror what we see, and yes, that's going to work for like Molly Burke because she's had her audience. She's been building her community. She's been building everything that she's done for a long time. And she has a lot of people help on deck. And there's nothing wrong with having hands on deck. But I always remind students that when you compare yourself to her, you're going to be fighting a battle that you're going to lose because Joseph Campbell has said comparison is a thief of joy. So I'm like, let me teach you from the ground up. Okay, here's how to get lighting. Like I taught one of my friends that was lights out. I'm like, here's how to be in the frame, in the shot all the time. And I taught them this method and they used it. And I was like, okay, cool. You got it. You're in the frame. And sometimes people, I'm like, FaceTime if you want me to double check and make sure that you're in the shot. I got you. If you want me to review the video, I have your back. And so I've always been that person. And that just takes me to where I am now, where I created the Blind Content Creator Collective, where it's specifically doing it on your phone because sometimes that's all people have. Sometimes the job, it's too many things. I'm like, I can figure out talk back on my Samsung Galaxy and I can figure out voiceover on my iPhone and we're all good. Like we can get things done and use and leverage the power of technology like Be My Eyes. And I love the Be My AI feature. And I taught them like, okay, when I send pictures to my blind friends, I've already put the image tag in there. So when they click on the picture, it's telling them what the picture is. And that's just a sign of, I respect you, I hear you, I see you, and things like that. And that's kind of the nutshell story. That is me, that is who I am. And that's how I came to get to this place of really wanting to create on my terms and really showing that people can also create on their terms. It doesn't matter your visual acuity. It's just what's in your heart to create and how can I help you create it? And that's why I'm here today.
Well, my name's Aaron's Opinion. I support your message.
Thank you.
That was, has anyone told you, gee, that was a lot of information that you just went over. That was a lot of greatness, is all that was, everything that was just great. I got to tell you, that was so great and so relatable. I will tell you that yes, you're very right that many people seem to be getting PhDs for the wrong reason. And that's something that I don't understand because I don't have a PhD. I do have a bachelor's, but not a PhD. That is a problem. And I think that blind people are really affected by that. You're very right. It does seem to be, and you noticed it, that in the blindness community, we have a lot of blind people who spend time worrying about their competition and cutting each other down and
Hmm.
all these various things. And it's very, very unproductive. Because the one thing you do want in a healthy economy is healthy competition. But people don't
Yes.
understand that. You want people to be doing better than you because
Hmm.
if people do better than you, then A, it's someone that you can look up to, perhaps, but also in an odd way, it's someone who is actually potentially one of your future supporters. So you want
Exactly.
you want people to be above you. You don't, in other words, you never want to be the smartest person in the room. You
Hmm.
want to be, now I'm not going to name drop, but someone very famous, and for people who listen to podcasts all the time know who said it on a podcast, but I'm not going to name drop it. But someone said something, and I'll paraphrase it. What you really want is you want to be kind of at the, put it in my own words. You want to be at the origin. When you're doing math, you want to be on the X and Y axis. You want to be at the point where those two things meet. You don't want to be too high or too wide or too left or too right. You want to be right in the middle is where you
Exactly.
want to be. The problem for people is, well, then where's the middle, right? We know what left is, we know what right is, we know what down and up are, right? But
Hmm.
where's the middle? And that's where it's very difficult. It seems like you work. By the way, thank you for being an early childhood educator. It seems like you've done a lot to help children. And
Yeah.
I just can't thank you enough for doing that. Um, Children deserve great people and great teachers. And unfortunately, my life, don't worry, articles to follow. Check your PM in Messenger to see the articles.
Oh,
When I get
awesome.
it, when I get around to it much later, not tonight, but another night when I have a moment, um, I will send you a couple articles about my past, and I will tell you that my parents had to advocate for me as well, and it's a very very difficult battle for many blind people and many sighted parents, and it's a constant struggle. And I think the funny thing about all this is that it seems to me, or it's my imagination, and you can decode this, it seems to me that the amount of people who are either misinforming or disinforming are growing, or is it just social media? I don't know. What would you say to that? And what I mean is, you see them all the time. These people who post in these groups for blindness things, and they post and they don't necessarily have all the facts right, and I get that, but sometimes they're posting and it's blatantly obvious to me that they haven't put forth any effort at all in researching
Hmm.
and learning about the issues, and that is a problem. If you can't spend the time to do the research, to get off your ass and do what needs to be done, then I really have limited sympathy. Now
Exactly.
maybe you have other ideas about that. The other, so what's your idea about that matter? About all these weird people, and I don't really want to say weird people, but you know what I mean. These people that are clearly well intentioned, but when push comes to shove, they either end up being a misinformer or a disinformee. In other
It's
words,
yeah.
what is really first end of that question? A, what am I really trying to ask? B, because I know you understand me. B,
Mhm.
what's really going on there? Like, is it my imagination? What's that about? Yeah.
I think there is a rise, or I believe that there is a rise of just complete and total misinformation. And one of the things that I noticed just from teaching children from a very young age. So repetition, one of my favorite Tony Robbins quotes, repetition is the mother of all skill. So you're only going to get better the more you do. And if you're not teaching your child to find context clues, then they're just going to parrot the same rhetoric. And I feel what happens in these groups is people want to be seen. So you can either A, go counterculture where you're going totally against the group norm, or B, you're just going to be like, I'm standing on what I'm saying. This is it. I'm absolutely right. And it comes like this like collision course for like not moving forward as a group. And one of the things that I have to tell people all the time, I go, there's different levels of access based on a multitude of your intersections. And that's like the parts that make you up. So your ethnicity, where you grew up, if you were in a two-family home, if you had access to a four-year education, if you were introduced to services as a child. And yes, parents might have had to advocate, but then there's some students that don't have parents that know how to advocate. And a lot of children benefited from me having to advocate for my son because I was like, hey, I got you. I'll be in that IEP meeting. And one of the things that somebody was like, how did you get therapy written into your son's IEP? And I was like, it is beneficial for my son to talk to someone other than his family members about what he's experiencing. So he has an outlet in a safe place for him to talk. And somebody was like, how did you do that? And like, I think it was a quote from the Dalai Lama. And he was like, know the rules so you can break them effectively. And I just read all the rules and read all the things and learned how to state that. And that's why, like, I remember my DOR counselor was like, well, we don't give people iPhones. And I was like, well, why did you have six people come here and give me an iPhone, say I need an iPhone? So I, being the person that I am, I went to my assistive technology teacher at my college and was like, hey, these are the things that she said she wanted to have. That lovely woman went and wrote her a list, and she gave me every single thing. She's like, she needs a computer. She needs a computer case. She needs an iPhone. She needs an iPhone with a cover on it. She just went through line by line and said these were the things that she needed. And they gave it to me because I had a person of authority give it to me. And sometimes in the blindness community, what happens is we're looking for that person of authority, or we're looking up to people. And I always say, I'm a regular person like you. Do not look up to me. Look up to yourself. Like, because if you put somebody on a pedestal, they are liable to fall off. And I don't get it all right all the time, but when I say something, I try to give an explanation. Not that I have to give one, but I go, I'm taking this at a look for a multitude of reasons, because you might think that this is something that's okay, but it's not. It's just like when we had the cane wars of not the folding cane, the straight cane, the this cane. I'm like, just use your cane. I do not care what kind of cane it is. I want you to use your cane and not be ashamed of it. And there's a really good book, and it's by Edward Bear, and it's The Seven Deadly Needs. And one of the needs is the need to be right. So sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm a mum's the word. I'm gonna let them be there. But what happens is, like any group, we get into a cycle of respectability politics, because it's just like, I help blind women know, like, learn how to do their makeup. And some people are like, why are you teaching blind women how to do the makeup? That's stupid. They can't see it, but they want to feel their best self. Sometimes you might be a chronic picker, so you don't know that you have dark marks on your face, or you have bags under your eyes because you're not sleeping well. There's ways to fix that so you feel more confident. And if I can help you do that, I'm not going to judge you for it. If you don't want to put on makeup, that's fine. But don't yuck someone else's yum, because everybody has different levels of vision. And I was doing my makeup lights out because I was always I had to be camera ready because they were taking pictures of me and putting them on the internet. And I was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Like, I need to figure this out. So I went to the Mac counter. I said, this is what I need to do. If I needed a refresher, I'd go back there, and they helped me. And so in these groups, what happens is people are fighting to be seen, they're fighting to be right, and they're not leaving space for a conversation. And then we've got people who are like, I can't take a person seriously if their punctuation's messed up. And I'm laughing because I know that people who have no punctuation, or they don't know how to correct it, these are the people that either A, they don't qualify until they're 55 to get some type of services, but the services are not as comprehensive as if they were in the age range that they take through vocational rehabilitation or Department of Rehabilitation. So they're kind of getting lightweight services because the organizations get funding from that, but they're not getting what that comprehensive services that they need, because I'm teaching my grandma. My grandma, she'll send a message through voice dictation. She doesn't know about saying full stop or comma or things like that. She just knows that glaucoma took one of her eyes, and that she can see, but she's still having difficulty. And she's fighting with wanting to use voiceover. And she's like, she'll send me messages, and she's like, I don't know how you do this. I don't know how you do this. And I'm like, Granny, it's not that it's hard. It was just unfamiliar at first. I never thought that I would be running my voiceover at like 95 words per minute or whatever. But I'm like, I need to get through this information. And I have amazing accuracy. And it's just a combination of, it's, I really feel that people are just like, they want to be heard and they don't know how to be heard. And the information is coming from different sources with different ideologies, different opinions, and then amongst those opinions, you have different groups that have their subgroups. And so it's kind of like the world's worst game of blind telephone, if that makes any sense. That's how I can explain it. That was my word vent, kind of trying to tie everything together.
Sure, absolutely. It sounds like also you have a lot of degrees and a lot of knowledge in a lot of different sections and areas. So the other thing that you kind of touched on throughout this whole beautiful story, economic justice. So you're probably someone that's very interested in the economy and
Yes.
economics for one thing. So economics, A, it's fun to talk about, and B, it's interesting. And then justice is fun to talk about, and it's
Yes.
interesting. So what is economics? What is justice? What is economic justice?
Yes.
How do you see blind people participating in economics, the economy, and justice? What do you really
Oh,
think?
I love that. So UCSC had two paths. They had the community justice, they had the medical justice path, and they had the economics justice path. And I was like, I've dealt a lot with the medical justice part because I actually had to try and sue my hospital for what happened because they gave me a medicine that I was actually allergic to. So I was like, I'm going to stay away from that. So we moved right on into the economic justice. And so economics is basically understanding the fundamental structures of this country. It's where the money goes, where it's going to, and it's basically how we operate. Who has the money? Who doesn't have the money? Who has the ability to spend the money? Who's using social services? Who's not using social services? And so we really focused on, okay, what is our impact on a community and things like that. So like every couple years, if you're on SSI or SSDI, you'll get that COLA allotment. So where your subsidy or your SSI or SSDI will go up by like 3.2% for the cost of living. That is not really the cost of living, because when we start to look at economics on like a micro level and how it affects blind people, the problem is based on if you had like two parents, based on if you had an advocate, based on if you had all of these things in access, and let's say even based on if your counselor likes you, you might have that pathway to college where you talk to that counselor or you talk to that DOR counselor. It's like, oh, you know what? You should do the work, ticket to work program. So then you go from getting your degree to the ticket to work to a job, which can lead to economic freedom or economic sustainability. However, let's just say you're not the best student. You're not necessarily following or doing what DOR wants, and then you're kicked out of the program. So you kind of have your skills, but you don't, but you're trying to find it. What messes everybody up when it comes to the economics of blind people is, number one, as a part of the disability community or the people with varying abilities, is economics impacts us a lot, and that's through legislation and things like that, because like there's a lot of people that choose not to get married if they're blind or visually impaired or have a varying ability. Why? Because then they're going to have to pay for medical insurance. They lose their benefits. I've seen this happen. A TikToker is like, oh, me and my boyfriend decided to get married, and then they realized that they lost their payment as soon as they got married. That was gone. So that secured amount of money that was coming in was gone, because guess what? You got married. Somebody else can support you. So when it comes to being a person with a disability or a varying ability, and you are on SSI or SSDI, you have a lot of life decisions that are impacted by that. And that's where the injustice occurs. Because let's say you're in an area where there is a higher, the housing prices are higher, they're more valuable. So that means there's more funding to help you. So like for instance, in my neighborhood, there is a food pantry, but the food pantry will deliver to the disabled or people with varying abilities and the seniors. So you don't have to go and pick up that food. And so these little different things impact people significantly, and people are ashamed to use services like EBT. Like I was telling somebody, I go, if you have an EBT or a SNAP benefits card, guess what? Number one, if you want to go to a museum, you can go to museums for free. You just check on the website to see which museums you can go to. And if you're getting services like Instacart, you don't have to pay that yearly subscription. You can pay $4.99 for the first year. So instead of thinking, oh, I don't have the $9.99 or paying $9.99 each time you're ordering food, because part of economics, if you don't work, you don't have a job, you can't take the Ubers. And with that stat being only 1 in every 4 blind people are gainfully employed, these things matter. So it's like all the things economically stack up. You're like, oh my gosh, this is so much. So in my class, I focused on the employment element. And then I actually experienced what I wrote about in not getting through to the next job. And I feel like one thing that blind counselors and people have to do is let us express that frustration. Don't course correct us when we're saying, you know what, this is my lived experience. This happened to me. You can't tell me I'm not a good person if I held high jobs when I was in college because I was responsible for a budget. I was making big money decisions and doing all of the things of a program coordinator. for a nonprofit organization in college. But when I come out into the world, the real world, after post college world, it's like, oh no, we're gonna go with somebody else. But I also learned to, after a while, not take it personal because I sat on hiring committees. I know how it goes. You have all the things you want, you get ranked 1 through 5, and then they pull, pull, pull. And my frustration was getting to those other levels, the higher levels, where it was like me between me and two candidates. And then what really got me with the economics of it all was really when a blind organization was very able. So it was like my most, it was the most ablest job interview I had. And it was very interesting, but it was a case of I have a PhD, I know better than you. You couldn't possibly do all of the things that is required of this job. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. You don't know my network. You don't know that I've been an organizer for forever. And I came to this interview. I traveled 200 miles within 8 hours to be at this interview and then made accommodations to stay for another interview on Monday. And you don't think I can do the job? It was one of the most pivotal to disrespectful moments that I ever experienced. And I remember crying so hard because I would have never thought that the blind community would be so ableist and so just, it was very interesting, but I also am very in tune with when somebody's threatened by what you're saying or what you're doing because showed up to the interview with an entire media kit. And I was like, well, this is how you guys can make your Facebook page with the alt text so it's actually accessible and do all of these things. And I was like, okay, where do we go from here? How can I change my economic status? Because I'm still a mom, I'm still trying to make it and things like that. And so fortunately, I found avenues to where I kind of have a buffer because I'm a Google trusted tester. And when they have surveys, I'll do that, but it still sucks. That's the part about economics and the justice part. It sucks when you want to work and you want to do what you love, but you can't, or your only options are, okay, do you want to, fold napkins? Do you want to make mattresses? Or do you want to do this because agencies have government contracts? And I was like, but I don't want to do that. I want to teach. I want to teach on the collegiate level. And you're barring me for that. So you're stopping my economic progress by your bias. And that's where the injustice happens, is when people see us as we can't do things, we are explaining things that don't need to be explained. And for the lucky few that have transitioned into successful work placements, a lot of times it's because they had a team of people behind them. They worked diligently to get there. And there's just not as many understanding people.
Yeah, it's exactly the problem. And I'm not really sure myself, and I'm sure you have an answer to this as far as disclosing disability. Now, I'm going to tell you my opinion,
Hmm.
and you're either going to love it or hate it, but it's my opinion. My opinion is that the employers who are willing to hire people with disabilities, who are willing to hire blind people, will hire you because they know you're the right person for the job anyway, but they'll hire you regardless of your blindness, whether
Hmm.
you tell them on day one or day 30. Now, other people will say, no, there's a strategy for at what moment you reveal the disability. So, have you developed a philosophy of the disclosure of blindness professionally to employers? Have you worked with candidates who are struggling with, well, how do I tell someone that I'm blind? What do you really think about that?
So when I was co-teaching, they had a strategy. Like they mapped out because it was like a 3-week program, and I'm not sure if they still do it, but it was a 3-week program where you went through like how to dress for an interview, what to say, how to do the STAR method, how to interview, and all of these things. And it kind of was the breakdown of, if you went in and you had your cane and things like that, and you had your guide dog with you, they had us prepare a statement. And I was like, I kind of got the ick from that because I was like, but I was like, have something prepared. And so one of the statements, the sample statements were like, hello, thank you for having me today. Um, I'm a visually impaired person. If you have any questions about my accommodations, I can answer for you that right now. And then you go into the interview. And I kind of didn't like that because I felt that it was centering your blindness. So that was kind of their strategy. In my instance, when I got to the interview, a lot of times my interviews were on Zoom and things of that, on like on my computer and stuff. And so most of the time I was always in early so I could turn off my voiceover, or I knew how to mute my mic, and I was very attuned. And so I often disclosed later. Like I disclosed when it was like, oh, do you have any questions? And then I would start asking, okay, well, what kind of accommodations do you have for a person that's visually impaired? Because I am visually impaired. And I want to assure you that I can do all the skills that are listed in the job description. I just would like to know more about your accommodations policy. But that was when I was in like one time I had like 4 interviews. And it was like this was interview 4, and I was like, okay, was getting to the last one, and I was like, okay, you better just disclose now so they know it. And sometimes what happens is you kick yourself in the foot because you think, oh, did I disclose too soon? And I really believe that if you go in there being you, they're gonna obviously see that you have a cane, and they're gonna, if they're gonna want to hire, they're gonna want to hire you. And I don't think that, in some ways, I think having a statement is pandering, but then I also think in some ways, the way the organizations kind of get their pay is by saying we're teaching these specific student learning outcomes of this course. So we're going to guarantee that by the time they go through this employment immersion program, that they know how to disclose. And I really feel it's up to each individual. For me, I said if I ever apply for another job, I'm not disclosing because I want them to see me as a candidate. They see me walk in. Well, if you see me walk in with my white cane, you obviously know that there's some type of vision thing going on. So it takes away sometimes from the conversation because you're trying to make them feel okay about you being blind, and that's not necessarily the best way to start off. It's like, let me see how you do this. But then I've also seen really cool things where this one young lady, she had got her new job. She had her guide dog, and they didn't have a place for the guide dog to go. So her job had set that accommodation up. And there are people, I want to start hearing more of those stories where jobs are accommodating because I know people are accommodating. And I really agree with so much of what you said about the disclosure piece, because they're going to know whether or not they want you. They saw your application, they saw something in that application, and more than likely, if they read it, and you're a person that has like, it was like there was a lot of blind organization stuff in my resume. They kind of knew that either I had somebody that was blind in my family, or maybe I was that person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all, you're 100% right. It's all easier said than done. The problem is every interview is subjective to some extent. So you
Mhm.
never can quite. The problem is you can't quite tell what the right answer is until after you did it. That's why it's
Oh,
difficult for
yes.
people because nobody performs their best in an interview, and it's always a problem. So anything that you can do when you're working with these other blind people to try to reduce these challenges, I think that would be a huge,
Yes.
huge, huge thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's more than
Mhm.
having the confidence in themselves.
Yeah.
I feel like I always say, well, you got to break the default setting, because sometimes people are mad because, let's say you stub your toe, but your default isn't I stubbed my toe. Your default is I'm blind, so that's why I stubbed my toe. When really you just stubbed your toe. And I had to kind of crack that out of my head and be like, everybody stubs their toe. It's not, everybody didn't see it. So like, I'm a big person of not making blindness the issue, because blindness is a beautiful part of who you are. Like
Absolutely.
I feel deeply like this experience happened to me for a reason, for me to understand that I'm beautiful through and through. I don't have to see any clearer. I don't have to see any better. I don't have to be another person for me to be better. And I think with the disclosure piece, that folds into the respectability politics that occur. And that's what really hurts any community, is saying that if you're not operating at this capacity, if you're not doing this thing, if you're not employed, then you are not worth the respect that I have to give. And that's where I get angry and upset, or I'll have bass in my voice. And I've had it plenty of times because I'm a beautiful African American woman, where people be like, well, you're being so mean. And I'm like, I'm not being mean. I'm expressing my point in a curt and straightforward manner. And I go, what you're doing right now to me is a dog whistle or a microaggression. And I'm going to need you to stop, because being disrespectful to someone because they don't have the training, they don't have the skills, or they didn't have the same level of access to you is never okay. And if you have a problem with me saying it this way to you, that is something that you're going to have to work on, because I'm talking to you at a level of respect. And like, I will say it just like that, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, she's so mean. She's so horrible." And I'm like,
No, and you're so right. And
"Yeah,
that's the difference. The other subtle thing that people have to learn, whether it's in podcasting or professionalism or teaching or traveling or whatever, that there is a difference, and it's very hard to tell the difference. But when the difference is clear, it's very clear. There's a difference between aggression and assertion. And
yes,
this is very, but right, but it's very hard for young people to tell. Okay. I have a very deep voice. I'm a very abrupt person. And most of the time, people do not respond well to me. Most of the time. Why? Because I'm assertive. Right. And I
mhm,
also have a very deep and aggressive voice when I need to. But I am a pretty abrupt guy. I don't beat around the bush, you know. But the overwhelming fact is that I think blind people need to both learn to be assertive more and professionally, I don't want to say aggressive, but more present. I think not
yes."
just I think we need more of a
Present,
more of
present,
a
and
presence.
presence and tenacious. And one of the biggest lessons, one of the first lessons that you learn in interpersonal communications is listen to understand instead of listening to reply. Because a lot of times people
Right,
have like
precisely.
their default settings going on. And so when I would work with the youth, I'm like, okay, did they say this about you, or are you feeling this about you?
Right, right.
And I
Or
go, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and that's how people are too. I mean, I work with students all day and I try to teach them the same thing. It's like the funny psychological thing, whether you're blind or not or sighted or not, we the funny thing is, and this is also getting worse, or I'm noticing it more, people only hear what they want to hear and they never hear what they're supposed to hear. And it's getting out of hand. It's almost like to some of these people in the social media spaces or around the
Hmm.
universe, it's like I know that I want to talk to you, but I know that I don't want to talk to you because if I do, I'm gonna have to figure out a way to get you to not hear what you want to hear, but hear what I'm telling you.
Oh,
So how
yes.
how now? But here's the problem. Here's the people. In every culture is different. You also know that I'm a French speaker.
Hmm.
I speak French, and French and the French people are both two things that are very true. They're very good debaters. Why are they good debaters? Because they know how to listen. And French people are
Hmm.
very able to listen and debate. And
Hmm.
Americans can't do both.
Oh, yes.
Americans tend to just kind of blabber, blabber and run their mouths, whereas French people are able to run their mouths when they need to, but debate when they can and listen everywhere else.
I
And
like
that's why it's
that.
important. Now, I'm also a bilingual guy, right? So a lot of times I have French students where we would go back and forth in the French conversation and then the English conversation and flip my brain as channels. Now I'm a pretty bizarre guy. In case you were wondering if I'm normal, no, I'm not. So I have different channels in there, and one of the things that I have to work on when I'm listening to French is you have to resist the urge because when you're proud to speak a second language, it's easy to want to jump in on somebody, but you just have to wait, pause, listen, listen,
Yes.
listen, 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 and then wait again. Okay, now, but it takes a lot of self-control to not talk. It's very hard to do, especially when you're proud or especially when you're emotional or
Hmm.
especially when you're excited or just pleased. It's hard to not interrupt people. It's very, very hard. And I find that blind people really need to work on that.
Yeah.
And it is something that really prevents blind people to some extent from being employed. Is
Yes. Its
just
presence
it's a
takes practice.
serious problem. Yeah.
I really feel it comes down to presence takes practice, and it's really one, a thickening of the skin, because we can become very sensitive to issues. And I feel like What also hinders the progress is the levels of transparency when people are going to their orientation centers or their blind schools, because what they're getting is one set of rules, like you have to do every single thing yourself, where you have to be totally independent. And I prefer self reliance over independence, right? And then you have the other part where it's like, but okay, my technology teacher has a person that is going through all of her paperwork, making sure that all of her paperwork is correct because it's going off to a government office. So, what is that messaging that's telling people? And then it's also lack of social interactions with people, because I had to learn how to navigate conversations as being a person that can't necessarily read social cues because I can't see them any longer. So then I'm listening with intentness and I'm like, okay, stay focused on the conversation, wait for them to pause what they're saying, and then you can articulate your thought. And this also helped when I was teaching my son how to have better communication as a person that had like a nonverbal learning difference. And I was like, okay, a conversation is like tossing a ball back and forth. And what happens sometimes is you meet a blind person and then they just verbal talk all over you, just all over, mile a minute. And I will say this to the fullest: I'm a yapper and I'm also a professional yapper. They have paid me money to talk. So when I'm saying something, I mean what I'm saying. And I also have over the years developed the skill of really listening and being present and being like, okay, what do they want to know from me next? Because I don't have to give my entire life story now in this one moment. There's many chapters. And I always thought, I'm like, if you're a blind person, you have a lot to say, write a book. Just go ahead and write a book and you'll get it all out of your system. And then you'll start listening more often. And it is the communication aspect that is a very big component of blind people being employed, because if you can't operate with office culture, if you can't know how to voice what you need from your employer or be solution oriented. I've always been solution oriented. And even when the school wasn't helping me and DOR wasn't helping me at UC Santa Cruz, I still was solution oriented. 90% of my work was done. It was just that I needed help editing it. And when I got that assistance, when I got that computer, within 4 weeks, I had all of my past semester's work turned in and I had straight A's. But that was just with a little bit of assistance and saying, hey, communicating effectively and saying, this is what I needed. And they were like, oh my gosh. And I graduated from UCSC with a 3.8. And I never had that problem again because I effectively communicated and I was doing well at my job. Even at my job, I had several meetings. I had to listen. I sat on a board. I had to sit and say, okay, well, we're writing this $32,000 check for this speaker. What do we think about this? And working in groups and learning how to organize, that's what helps. And I think the internal, how you feel inside, also impacts how you communicate at work.
I think you're right. I think you're very, very right. So exactly what types of things do you do now? Obviously, you're doing wonderfully for the community, for yourself, for your son. You're just doing great. And
Yeah.
you're the type of person that I want in the Aaron's Opinion family. And you're the type of person that we want. You're the type of person that we want in our corner for sure, as far as finding knowledge and success and just
Yes.
overall, and just you're just a great person to talk to. You're just a great friend. And it's overwhelmingly obvious that
Oh,
you're
well,
just
thank you.
you're just there. You're just present and there and just completely aware of how to succeed in life. And that's what other blind people need and everybody else needs to see all this. So yeah, so exactly what do you do? What are your different economically
Avenues.
speaking, different
Yes.
avenues of employment? You obviously do several different things to earn a
Yes.
living, right? So
So, yes,
exactly
I
what do you
do.
do? Yeah.
Yes. So what I do now is I do professional speaking engagements, and then I have what's called Voluptuous Prince LLC. Thicker is better. So I actually make. I don't like the term low vision. I've never liked that term, but I
Well,
know
you
it's
just
a.
said it. Why are you saying it?
It's a. I know. Well, to give
Well,
context.
you
So
well you
basically,
brought it up. I don't know why
yes,
you brought it
yes.
up if you don't
I
like
know.
it.
I don't know why either.
Well, you brought it
You know
up.
what? Habit. So I
Okay.
make thick print books. So the lines are bigger
What?
and more legible for people that are on this beautiful vision spectrum. So they're thicker is better. So I design cool little covers
What?
and I have those on Amazon.
Okay. So
Yeah.
wait, wait,
So
wait. So stop. Wait, hold on. Let's just pause for a moment.
pull
So
it back.
you design thick print cut. Well, but then how do they read the book? Then what's the book?
So these are like notebooks to write in. So like
Okay.
in my so I can still see to write. So I've always still write. I've always been able to write. So for me, I love writing my affirmations and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go to like the lighthouse to go get notebooks, but I just felt the type of way about saying low vision notebook. Like I was like, I can still see things. I'm like, I'm very picky with words. Like, so
Okay.
when my son, when they said, oh, your son has a nonverbal learning disorder, I was like, absolutely not. You have a nonverbal learning difference. We got to figure some things out. You learn differently. And so even with the ADHD, I always told him you learn differently because I understand the stigma that comes that is attached with the word disability. And I was like, for governmental purposes, you are a person that has a disability. You are not disabled by any means. You have things that are working for you. We have to give you the systems and the tools. So I was very particular with words. And I was like, I always loved things that were bigger and legible and things like that. So I created like my first voluptuous print coloring book. And so that was where it was bigger pictures and things like that because when you're there they have low vision rehabilitation,
Mm-hmm.
so it was one of the ways that I naturally knew how to do a lot of things with fine motor. Like when people are like, I have a hard time, putting a plug in outlet, and I was like, you need to practice putting beans in an ice cube tray. Why? Because you're working on those gross fine motor skills. And so that those are skills that I've always kept up with, and so that's why the doctors were kind of confused when my visual acuity got better instead of got worse. And it's because I've never stopped doing eye exercises. I've never stopped like drawing and coloring books. I've never stopped writing. I've never stopped doing these things in the past 12 years. I'm always doing something to just make my senses sharper. So it's not necessarily that I can see the plug better. It's that I've developed the skills and the muscles in my hands to do that task better. And so what happened was I was like, well, I want cute notebooks for me to write in. And so then naturally I just created the Voluptuous Prince LLC. And so then every
Oh,
couple of
cool, cool,
months,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll just release those on Amazon and people can pick them out. And then now that I created my first memoir, Beautiful Accomplice, like now I'm officially an author. I wrote my memoir. It's the most authentic and unapologetic version of my story that took me about a good 8 months to write. And
Good, good.
I really focused on that. And so I do that as well as my advocacy work. Now I am working with the Center for Fighting Blindness, and I'm in the Aspect cohort number 9. And what we're learning to do over basically a 20-week period is learn how to advocate. And then next year we will go to DC. So I'm transitioning back into my advocacy work. And then on top of all these mishmash gosh things that I'm doing, I actually will sometimes on occasion I will ghostwrite for people. So I will write their copy for advertising and marketing campaigns. So like I do freelance work on Fiverr. So like somebody will be like, this is the campaign, this is what I need from you. And then I will write that because my hobby is marketing and advertising and things like that. So
Hmm.
I love that. So yeah, so I will have different copies for little brands, people that are
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out their social media tags and stuff like
Hmm.
that and all of those things. So that's kind of what keeps me
Hmm.
afloat and
Yeah.
keeps
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
doing the things that I want to do. So since I couldn't find the traditional 9 to 5 job, I created my my own
Sounds like
kind
you're
of jobs where I
sounds
could
like you're
have,
doing it sounds like
yeah,
you're doing great.
because I
Wonder.
didn't want to be depressed about it. I couldn't do that anymore.
Well, good. Well, don't. Is your book that you wrote your memoir, is that on Audible? Because I love Audible.
It isn't on Audible because Audible has one of those gatekeeping walls where you have to have someone professionally record it. So now I'm looking into that where I can have somebody actually record it. Because I was like, oh my gosh, so it's on Kindle, and like I don't like the Kindle reader, but it can be read aloud to me on Kindle. So it's Kindle and then it's hard copy. And when
Mm.
I did the hard copy, I actually did the hard copy in the font set for
Mm-hmm.
people that are legally blind. So my aunt, she's 89, she called me, she's like, first of all, you didn't tell me you wrote a book. Second of all, I'm so glad that I can read it. It's easy on my eyes. And I was like, well, Auntie, I made it that way because I wanted people that were legally blind that could read it to not feel like they were left out, because I'm just a very inclusion focused person.
Right.
And it's always just been who I am. You've heard it in my story. I just don't want people to feel the pain that I felt. And we're always going to experience pain at any point in time. But if I can
Sure.
prevent you through my words or through something I've said, um, I'm going to try and do that. And so, like, one of the things that I did is I started the RAIN movement, and that's just where it's a Google form that's on my link tree and my bio on TikTok. And I'm adding it to other places now where you fill out the form. The rule is no struggle but story. Tell me who you are. And then every month I put it in a randomizer, and then I pick a person and I'm like, well, what do you need? And I don't want an explanation for what do you need. It's like, what do you need? Because DOR, your college, everybody's always making you say, well, why do you need this? Why? No, what do you need? Somebody was like, I need a wig so I can go on a job interview. Okay, send me the Amazon link. And I picked it up and sent it to them. I needed this one family, the mom lost her funding from school. She didn't know how she was going to do Christmas. So I did Christmas. It wasn't a big Christmas, but I did Christmas. I didn't ask anybody for it. But I feel like this community has given so much to me that I can give back to them. And it's what fills me up. And to date, I've done about $5,000 of my own money
Wow.
in just giving back to our community. And I was like, we can give back in small ways. I've sent so many people gift cards for coffee and just something to make people happy. I feel like it's a whole pay it forward, and it's not about me being seen or getting the credit. It's literally, I don't want somebody to have to argue for a limitation, and sometimes we're forced to. And that's where I get riled up. And that's where it's like, oh, somebody's like, they would be like, well, why brass knuckle beauties? Isn't brass knuckles like violent? And I was like, sometimes you have to shatter that glass ceiling. You have to shatter that barrier. And it's really a tool. Like, it's something that got me through that, my dark night of the soul, something that got me through how am I going to live this life as a blind person? And even as people that aren't oriented with things, I'm like, okay, well, how can I help you? How can I
Mm-hmm.
support you? That's the question I always say, ask before you act. Say, how can I support you? And my family's still learning. Like, I was walking one time and my mom went to course correct me because somebody was waiting. And I go, no, 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 mom, they moved. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
give her grace. So I practice those things.
Mm-hmm. 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 Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Before we walk to the end of the conversation, we have
Yes.
another great friend who, as you know, is in the
Hmm.
waiting room. His name's Latabo, and
Awesome.
you're in California, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I privately one on one, I'll tell you a little bit more, but for 1,001 reasons, I'm in the universe. We'll just keep it there. But Latabo is on the other side of the world in Pretoria, South Africa, and
Oh,
he has a
wow.
question for you.
Awesome.
He's also a fellow broadcaster, podcaster, extraordinaire. He's also got a story and a presence. Let's bring him on. I'm sure he has a question. All right, yeah, he does.
Awesome.
It looks like he's pulling on his headset. All right,
Awesome.
let's do this. Yeah. All right. I know you have a question. One question, go, Latabo.
Okay. Well, let me just say first thing, good morning. Well, I just want to comment before I do your question. I just what Nicole has said about advocacy and like getting back to the community because as well as you say, um, there's this other center that we are basically I'm working at. So yeah, I think it's like we deal with mental disabilities and all that stuff. But
It's a
I
little
just
hard
want
for me
to
to hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
Latabo.
okay,
Yeah, the mic. I know it's late over there. The mic.
yeah.
Can you either type the question out, just type it, or well, of course, when Nicole
Um,
joins the WhatsApp group, you can ask her. But
okay,
Yeah, it's
Oh,
really hard for me.
can you hear me now?
Can you hear him,
I just,
Nicole?
Yeah, that's better now.
That's better. I agree. Okay, try
okay,
one more time at the top.
okay, no problem. Okay, well, I'll say that, um, well, I like the interest, like the stuff that you're saying about advocacy and giving back to the community. So, as I was saying that, well, I've started, actually, I'm in a program, called EPWP in South Africa. Also like giving back to the community, like as I was saying that in the what we call it, the center, like deals with people who has intellectual disability. I can say that. And well, from my side, I just want to say that I commend you for that. And I just want to say that like the universe can say that it needs people like you, Nicole. And actually, my question is, actually, it's just my question before I sleep, because obviously in the morning I have to get ready for work. Um, the question is, like, what is it like to, give back to the community, especially like the blindness community at large?
There is something that is so rewarding because I had okay, everything starts with a decision. And
Mm,
I decided 44 days ago that for 365 days, I would go hard in the paint, specifically helping blind people be better content creators. And I
mm,
gave myself self the space and the grace to like change it up. It didn't have to be the same thing. I wasn't going to make it hard. And in that, it gave other people the power where all of a sudden I was in different blindness groups. It just the universe aligned and I was like,
mm,
okay, well, we're here now. Somebody wrote me in a Facebook. They found my Facebook, hit me up in Messenger, and they're like, or no, they wrote it on TikTok. They're like, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to take my content creator journey seriously because this is the unconventional avenue that Department of Rehabilitation is not going to pay for. It's not going to be as important to a blindness organization because it's not helping them gain the dollars or the support. That's not necessarily important. It's not a social component that is high on their list of things that will be paid for because that's how the system works. There is a nonprofit industrial complex. That's kind of what my major studied when it came to that economic component. And I was like, I
mm,
can't be the traditional nonprofit. I have to do everything on my terms. So within a morning, I created a Facebook group. Then I put a post. I was like, tell everyone. And to have that person 9 days later say, I've been creating consistently for 9 days. I think I'll be able
mm,
to support my family and feel like I'm contributing. That is worth more than any money that somebody could ever give me. And so I do this from the pureness of my heart. I do this because I don't want anybody to feel hopeless. And I don't
mm,
think they talk about the depression rates enough or the unaliving that occurs self inflicted to the
mm,
blind people because they don't
mhm,
want to be here because they don't feel seen. And if I can
mm,
say, for lack of better words, I see you, I hear you, I understand you,
Yeah.
I respect you, you're here for a purpose.
mhm,
And sometimes I see in my book, it says, I see the beauty and the brilliance in the dark and in the light.
Yeah.
The darkness
Such
wasn't bad for me, you know?
right. And now that you've been through that, and that's such a beautiful way to come to an end of a beautiful episode, as always. Thank you, Latabo. What
no
a
problem.
incredible way to end the episode. But before we do,
Yes.
before I say so, how can someone get in touch with Nicole Harris? I want to know if you can ask me, Aaron Richmond, only and or Aaron's opinion, either way, only one more question to really make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster.
Oh,
What do you
okay.
want to ask? One
Let's
question, one more
see.
question.
One question. If you had a magic wand and you could change one element that would help the blind community and it would go across the board. You'd snap your fingers like Thanos and it would be changed. What would it be?
I think what I would change is if I could only do one thing, it would be to show that podcasting is a great sense of peace and happiness and knowledge for blind people and everyone. I think that all blind people should try to develop a love for podcasting. And I have found that for me as a content creator, podcasting has given me a sense of peace and happiness and fulfillment. So if I were to say one thing, blind people should love podcasting. Whether you listen to them or produce them, get involved in podcasting.
I love that. 10 out of 10 across the boards.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right. So if someone wants to get in touch with Nicole, how can you be reached?
Yeah, so on Facebook and all social platforms, it is the Brass Knuckle Beauty, and Brass Knuckle Beauty is all one word. On Facebook, you can find me under Nicole Harris, or you can search the Blind Content Creator Collective and just add to the group, and you'll automatically be entered in. And that is how you can get a hold of me. If you message me, I check my messages Monday, Wednesday, Fridays in the morning and in the evening. So I'm always around and available. If you have a question for me, I always answer it, and I do my very best.
Okay, very good. We'll click the link in the description. We'll connect later, but I'm sure you'll write a nice paragraph for us, who you are, and then all the socials, all the plugs.
All of them. I will hand those to you.
Well, there you go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Latabo. Nicole, we will connect in just a few moments, or maybe tomorrow. I don't really know.
Awesome.
We'll connect. We'll connect. Just be prepared for a messenger update tomorrow at some point, probably. Anyway,
Okay, great.
Nicole, you did a magnificent job. I got to tell you, fascinating, magnificent. Keep up, keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing the right thing. Thank you so much, everybody. And as we say here at Aaron's Opinion, have a very good rest of your day wherever you're listening in the world, and be well and keep podcasting and keep spreading peace, happiness, and knowledge. All right, everybody, take care. And until next time, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow. If you're still surviving on YouTube, thank you so much. Like the video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and tickle the bell notification to know when we go live next right here on YouTube. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you to Latabo and everybody else who participates here at Aaron's Opinion. We couldn't do it without you. We'll be back soon, everybody. Be well. Be well over there, whatever side of the world you're tuning in from. Be well, and we'll talk soon. All right. We'll catch up soon on Messenger. Take